Abby Phillip, thanks for being here.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here.
Abby is the host of CNN Newsnight with Abby Phillip, and she is here to discuss another film on the list from the New Republic of the 100 most significant political films of all time. This is number 37, The Murder of Fred Hampton. Why'd you pick The Murder of Fred Hampton?
This film, I think, really marked a period of time that is extremely significant in American history. It was a time of a lot of political violence. It was a time of social upheaval. And it deals with something that I think has a lot of resonance today, which is what's the value of an official narrative? And how does one challenge that? And watching the film, you're struck by how raw it is, but what it does is incredibly important. And as a journalist, I thought it was really compelling because it not only portrays things that were occurring at the time, but it also investigates an act almost as it's occurring. I thought that was incredibly fascinating about it.
The movie's from 1971. Fred Hampton was an unbelievably charismatic activist, just 21 years old. He was the chairman of the Illinois Black Panther Party.
I might be in jail, I might be anywhere, but when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips that I am a revolutionary.
Filmmakers here, Howard Hawks and Mike Gray, they were working on a movie already, which is why they have all this really great footage of Fred Hampton. And in the middle of them making a movie, they learn one morning that Fred Hampton is dead. And the official narrative that you were talking about, Abby, was that the Black Panthers were violent and they had a stash of guns in this place and they got into a shootout with police and Fred Hampton was killed. That we now know is not at all what happened.
Not at all. And one of the key bits about this is that the Black militant movement in the United States at that time really was as described. It was a militant movement. They, in some cases, advocated violence or gun ownership. They urged their followers to fight back, to not be passive. But what's so fascinating about this movie is it really shows a really unvarnished picture of the rhetoric, of the ideology, but also the community service, the role that these militant movements played in communities like Chicago. And it's almost like a film in two parts. It's the part before Fred Hampton is killed that really shows this clear, raw picture of a Black power movement in America at its height. And the latter half of the film deals with a police narrative about what happened during that raid that is directly contradicted by facts, video, evidence that the filmmakers, because they just so happened to be making this film, were able to capture almost in real time. So that's why I called it almost an investigative project.
I mean, it is generally accepted now. We now know what happened, and you'll see it in the film. But there's nothing more powerful in telling a story that involves crime than the police narrative. The police narrative becomes the journalist's narrative, I'll just say, a lot. I don't know whether it's 90%, I don't know whether it's 95%.
And that's still true today.
That's still true today, right? The cozy relationship between police reporters and police, which I suppose may be inevitable, is just hard to get past. And it's really hard to change that narrative. Once the police tell you, hey, here's what happened. These guys came out shooting, they were shooting at police were in danger, we returned fire, 2 people were dead.
Yeah, layered on top of that, I mean, imagine that in a world where there are no body cameras.
Right.
There are no real independent witnesses. This is at a time when the American public was really against people like Fred Hampton. They were viewed as violent threats, as communists. And so the idea of challenging a police narrative in that environment and listening to the perspective of the people who were demonized, that's pretty revolutionary. That's not something that even today I think it would be difficult for a filmmaker to do.
It's very hard for anybody to do, to challenge that police narrative without the tools that we now have. The second thing that I got out of it, in addition to challenging the police narrative, was that everything you say about the Black militant movement is true, but every time you hear Fred Hampton talking about taking up arms, it is always in response to if you come at him with guns without cause. It's not this threat that we're going to start shooting recklessly, it's that we're going to defend ourselves.
Even that concept of taking up arms for self-defense it's not as if that's not controversial as well.
Yeah.
And at that time, it was controversial, the idea of fighting back.
Yeah.
And the fact that there were guns present at the scene of the raid made it all the more likely that the public would assume the police narrative was true.
Yeah.
And the film does something really extraordinary, which is that it not only shows visually what happened, but it really investigates the forensics of it all. The crime scene of this raid was left as it was. There's blood on the floor. Again, that's something that I think even today you would be hard-pressed to find that kind of unvarnished footage. And as you said earlier, we now understand it to be true that Fred Hampton was targeted and killed. But I'm not sure we would understand it to be true in that way had there not been this kind of evidence laid out there for the world to see.
I think that's all entirely fair. Abby Phillip, thanks very much. Let's watch the movie. We'll come back and talk more afterwards. Here it is, from 1971, The Murder of Fred Hampton. Back here with Abby Phillip, hosts CNN Newsnight with Abby Phillip, weeknights at 10. Abby chose the number 37 film on the New Republic's list of the most significant political films of all time from 1971, The Murder of Fred Hampton, which we just saw. I was surprised at some of the rhetoric. I expected, you hear about the black militant movement of the late 60s and early 70s, and there's some rhetoric you expect, but there's a lot of Fred Hampton talking about what he really envisioned was not a black revolution, it was a people's revolution, right? It was a socialist revolution that would include brown people, and as he said, and yellow people, and red people, and poor white people, and
a rainbow coalition.
A real rainbow coalition.
Part of the ideology was also about understanding that poor whites and black people and people of other racial and ethnic backgrounds, they believed were all being held back from solidarity. And there are a lot of people who listen to the rhetoric in that first half of the film, and the cops being called pigs. They hear a lot of language that you might miss the forest for the trees here if you just focus on that kind of language. And I think that if you listen closely, watch closely what's happening in this film, you see that being distracted by words being used and missing the broader aims of the movement, which were freedom for Black people and people of all different racial and ethnic backgrounds against bigotry, you might miss it if you're not paying close attention. But I don't want to minimize it. You know, it is jarring to hear that kind of language today. You wouldn't really hear it. You know, it's funny today.
I'm glad you mentioned the repeated calling of cops pigs. And, you know, I mean, I'm the last person who would go back in time and give advice to the black militant movement. They really don't need to hear from me. But as I was making notes, I was like, I'm going to need an 81% reduction in the use of the word pigs.
Like it's a lot.
Right, and it unquestionably undermined, because there's a lot there that would have appealed to a lot of people who I imagine couldn't get past some of the rhetoric.
That is exactly the point that other Black people were making at the time about the Black Power movement. We should be clear, this was not something that all Black Americans bought into, and many of them were also opposed to it for those same reasons. So this dispute, this conversation that we're having about should they have turned the dial down a little bit more, that was happening at the time.
Right, that was
within Black America and outside of it as well. I was going to bring up this scene where they were feeding the kids cereal.
Yeah, right, yeah.
That's the other side of this movement as well. What caused all of these people to show up in almost a church and have this fervent, almost religious-like affiliation with this movement? And it's because their needs were being met. They provided services, critical services, to kids who didn't have health care, who didn't have food, in addition to the fact that people like Fred Hampton spoke to their desire to break free from what was at the time a racial apartheid system in the United States.
Yeah. Before we go, I think people who were compelled to know more about Fred Hampton would be interested in the 2021 film Judas and the Black Messiah. That's the movie where Daniel Kaluuya played Fred Hampton and won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. It's worth seeing.
It is absolutely worth seeing. And what I love about that film is that it actually tells the perspective of Fred Hampton's associate, who basically ratted him out to the FBI and made this raid possible. It kind of takes a different perspective on it. You don't see that very much in this 1971 film, but the 2021 film really deals with actually something that was not uncommon, which is the infiltration of these movements.
The FBI and the Chicago police were all over the movement, and now the movie tells that part of it, the entirely true story of the I guess somewhat reluctant informant, but informant nonetheless.
Exactly.
Yeah. Abby Phillip, thank you so much. This was great.
So great to be here. Thank you.
Abby's done for the night, but the political movies will continue here on TCM, so stick around.
Next on TCM, JFK, then Z, and later Night and Fog. TCM says never again tonight.